we get to finally say and speak and sing and shout, hallelujah, Christ is risen. I am so excited for it to be Easter for multiple reasons. First and foremost being that because it's Easter, it means that Jesus is alive. Because it's Easter, we know that death has been defeated. Because it's Easter, we know that good is stronger than evil. That's why we gather here on an Easter Sunday, to hear that good news. It's why we gather here every Sunday, to hear that good news. Because when we look out into the world and we see the brokenness, and we see the death, and we see the terror, and we see all of the scary things in the world, we need to hear that Christ has risen above those things. And that he promises to lift us up above all of the scary things of this world as well. So first and foremost, that's what I'm excited about being Easter Sunday. I'm also excited, this is a little more personal, and I know some of you agree with me. There's a reason that we have red roses on the ground today. It's not just for Jesus. It's because Wisconsin, where I'm from, they looked dead in the basketball game if you watched it, and then they rose. Right? And so tomorrow they have that's again just a side note of what I'm really excited. Go Badgers. Not nearly as big of news as Jesus rising from the dead, however. Another reason that I am so excited that Easter has finally arrived is because it means that Lent is done. Now don't get me wrong, I love Lent. And it's such an important season, it's such a powerful season. It's what reminds us that when we show up here on Easter morning, what it truly means to say that Christ is risen, that he is risen indeed. I love singing the Holy Evening Prayer with you on Wednesdays. I love journeying with you to the cross. I love all of the extra events and activities that happen in and around the church. But Lent lasts for 40 days. And so by this point, whenever Easter arrives, me and a whole bunch of other pastors around the globe, we are running on empty. And I look around and no one had sympathy for me at 8:30. They were like, so what? It's your job, man. Deal with it, right? And that's exactly what I expected. I didn't expect any sympathy. I didn't come here to say, I'm so tired, everybody. And you say, oh, we feel so bad because you're doing your job, right? No. I'm running on empty, I'm exhausted, but as I look around, the reason I don't get any sympathy is because so many of you are too. You also are exhausted for one reason or another, and if you're not exhausted today, you have been exhausted. And if you haven't been exhausted, I promise you, you will one day be exhausted. Right? We are all running on empty for one reason or another. Sometimes we are physically running on empty because we're working too hard, and when we're working too hard, we're not sleeping well, and when we're not sleeping well, we're not eating well. And so sometimes we are running on empty physically. I hope that some of you are here in worship today because you needed to be spiritually recharged, right? Sometimes we are running on empty spiritually, that we aren't praying as we ought to be, that we aren't worshiping regularly as we ought to be, that we haven't dusted off our Bible in a while, and we find that we look at our spiritual gas tank and we're running on empty. We might be financially running on empty. We might be emotionally running on empty. That might actually be what your car looks like. I love to run my car down to the E. I know it's not good for my car, but it's living on the edge. And I'm originally, again, from Wisconsin, from a small area in Wisconsin, and sometimes you drive for like 40 miles and there's no gas station. And it's so fun to watch my family squirm. You know, and just wonder, will we make it, right? You love that when I do that, don't you? So, we're all running on empty. I want you to think about the time when you felt like you were running on empty the most. When you were just absolutely exhausted, you were at the end of your rope. So just think about it for a moment. Sorry to be stressed. But think about running on empty. What does that feel like? Oh. It feels like what Mary Magdalene and the disciples felt on that very first Easter. We gather together on Easter morning and we see Christ was risen, but they didn't know that Christ had risen. They were running on empty physically, spiritually, and emotionally because their friend, their teacher, the one who they thought was the Messiah, had been arrested and crucified and buried. And so any of us who have lost loved ones think of that moment that it's like to lose a loved one, especially in those couple of days following. And there's this emptiness and there's this despair. And that's what they were feeling. They were running on empty. Speaking of running, there's a whole bunch of mentions of running in our Bible reading for today. I just want to look at the gospel lesson again. It says, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb, and she saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. And we need to pause right there, because she's already devastated. She's already grieving. She's already exhausted. And now what? She goes to the tomb, and Jesus isn't there. Someone has removed the stone. Someone has taken Jesus. What would you do? We find out what she did. She said, I'm running. So she ran. Verse 2 tells us. She ran and she went to tell Simon Peter and the other disciple, maybe they know where Jesus went. So she ran and she tells them, someone has taken the Lord from the tomb and we don't know where they have laid him. So Simon Peter and the other disciples say, all right, well, we should run too. Verse 4 says, the two of them were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter. Mary runs. The two disciples run. And we get the sense, because of how the story of Easter has gone out into the world, that they never stopped running. They never stopped telling the story, right? They were running on empty, and suddenly they were running on empty. When you think of the disciples running on that first Easter morning, we get a whole new twist of the idea of running on empty. Would it be amazing if we would run with the good news of the empty tomb throughout our lives? Would it be amazing if on Sunday mornings, Christians throughout Houston and throughout this country and throughout the world would get just as excited about running with this good news? I have a dream that someday that will be happening right here. That you will roll out of bed on an Easter morning or any Sunday morning, you will roll out of bed and you will run. You'll roll out of bed and you'll just start running. And in fact, I saw people on Space Center Boulevard on my way to church today, and I wanted to roll down my window and go, I'll see you at church, dude! Because I thought they were just running to church, right? But I'm glad I didn't say it, because they'd be like, whatever. Or who are you, right? And so I just dream that people will be running down Space Center Boulevard, and I'll say, where are you going? They'll say, we're going to church, because we're running on the good news of the empty tomb, right? And in fact, then you'll come to church, and I'm really dreaming for this one. You'll run into church and you'll say, on your mark, get set, go. I'm getting the front row. I'm waiting to see a day that the front row is actually full. It'll happen. It'll happen, right? And even better yet, at the end of worship, when I say, go in peace, serve the Lord, you won't even stick around and say, thanks be to God. You'll just run out the door and you'll say, all right, we are going to go and serve the Lord. We are going to go and love our neighbors. We are going to go and run on empty with the good news of the empty tomb, and we're going to share it with the whole world. So I think that we've just had it wrong all of these years. All of you who look beautiful, dressed in your wonderful dresses, and those of you wearing a suit and tie, you look fantastic. And if you didn't dress up, you look fantastic. But as I look at your feet, you're all wearing the wrong shoes. I think that on Sunday mornings, we need to kick off our dress shoes and we need to put on our running shoes so that we can be ready to run on empty, to run on the good news that Jesus is risen. And so I'm going to show you a brief video, and it's going to help us to imagine what it might have been like to have been Peter and the other disciple racing to the tomb and seeing that Jesus had risen. Laughter is contagious. The good news of the Easter tomb being empty is contagious as well. If you came to worship today running on empty, physically, spiritually, emotionally, in any way, may we peer into that empty tomb, and even though the tomb is empty, may it fill us with joy. Just like they laughed because they said, Jesus told us he was going to rise from the dead, but we didn't believe him, and he really did. May we leave worship today running on the good news of the empty tomb. May we return next week where we can be renewed, re-energized, and celebrate that we have been redeemed. And the people said,